Greetings, friends, and welcome to MCC's webinar. We're glad you joined us from wherever it is you're joining us today. These webinars are a behind the scenes look at MCC's work around the world, and there are people from around the world joining us tonight, some on Zoom and some via Facebook Live. So greetings to you all. And thank you for your ongoing support for MCC and for your interest in our work. We're really thrilled that you're part of the MCC story. Many of you are just incredibly passionate about welcoming newcomers and supporting refugees in the name of Christ. We are very grateful for your partnership. My name is Rick Kober-Bauman. I serve as MCC Canada's Executive Director, and I will be your host. I'm coming to you from my home near the tiny hamlet of Shakespeare in southwestern Ontario. So a few logistics in case you're not entirely familiar with Zoom webinars. You will be kept muted throughout. If you'd like to submit a question, which we would welcome, we really hope many of you do, use the Q&A function. When you move your cursor, you'll see a Q&A pop up in the menu at the bottom. I think it's fourth from the left. And if you are on Facebook, then you should submit your questions through the Facebook comments section, and we'll be monitoring those throughout the hour. You can submit your questions anytime, and we'll keep track of those. We may not be able to ask all of them, depending on interest. And by the way, I'm thrilled to announce that we hit our upper limit in terms of registrations that we had room for. So we're thrilled to have the kind of interest that we do tonight. There's also a recording being made of our session. So if you're wanting to come back to it or share it with friends, you'll certainly be able to do that. Now, let me say a little more about tonight's topic. Some of you may know, many of you probably do, that tomorrow is World Refugee Day. And we're really glad that you've chosen to celebrate with us. Some of you might have prepared your favorite food, the recipe that's perhaps been introduced to your community by being involved in sponsorship. If you cooked that and maybe you're enjoying it right now, please feel free to let us know. We can drool along with you. Perhaps you can put the recipe, or at least the name of the dish, in the chat and tell us a little bit about how you're enjoying it. As many of you know, Mennonite Central Committee was an original sponsorship agreement holder from back in 1979, when this whole private sponsorship arrangement was made with Canada's federal government. And since that time, partnering with churches and other sponsorship group, MCC Canada has helped to bring more than 13,000, I will say that again, it's a remarkable number, 13,000 newcomers to Canada. Many of you have been very involved in part of that story. So this evening, we're going to hear stories from Paul Shetler-Fast. Paul is MCC's Global Health Coordinator, and he'll be talking about the impact of COVID-19 on displaced people and the effects of COVID on refugee resettlement. We're also going to hear from two sponsorship groups who will share their stories of welcoming refugees into their communities. Both groups started as blended visa office referred, or BVOR, but each had part of the family that couldn't come at the beginning. Both groups also dealt with medical challenges. So you'll hear more about both the joys and the challenges in this next hour. Our presenters are going to speak for about 8 minutes, and we're going to try and keep the last half or so of the hour for questions and your feedback. So submit your questions anytime, as I said, or we'll happily take them too in that last half hour. So a little more about our presenters. I mentioned that Paul is a fellow staff member. He's, as I said, the health coordinator, and his work around the world serves as an internal resource for us at MCC on public health issues. He has been with MCC for 6 years. He is married to Rebecca. They have recently been representatives of MCC in Haiti. They have 2 children, Madeline and Gideon, and they live now in Goshen, Indiana. So welcome, Paul. We also have with us from the Schultz family sponsorship group in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Terry Schultz. and he'll say more about himself and his group. And also joining Terry is John. John is from the group that was sponsored by Terry and company in BC. John's mom was Muadi Beatrice Magenda, and she goes by Hope. And they came, as I said, as a Bivor family, arriving in 2017. And then at the end of 2019, they were able to clear the way for two of Hope's youngest sons to come to Canada, one of whom we're meeting tonight, John. Welcome, John. Thank you for representing your family and this story, and welcome to Terry as well. So we'll hear part of the COVID complicated story and about how there were other family members from Hope's family that were finally able to arrive last October. And then finally, a second sponsorship group, this one from Steinbach, Manitoba, the Grace Mennonite Church sponsorship group. Their leader was Ed Neufeld. Welcome, Ed. Thanks for joining us tonight. And we may also have a family member, Saif Assi, who was part of that family, and we're hoping he's going to be able to join us as well. Kamal and Fatan Assi and their 6 children, including Saif, arrived in Steinbach in January of 2016. Originally from Syria, like many, they had gone to Lebanon. And I misspoke a moment ago. Saif was the one that was not able to come originally with the family. He had gone already to Europe, so wasn't with the family when they came to Canada, but was able to relocate almost 2 years later to Canada in November of 17. And the third part of the family, the mother and the sister, arrived just last November after COVID forced them to travel or to cancel earlier travel plans. Those are our guests, and we invite you to give them your attention in the order that I've introduced them. So unless there are any questions or technical concerns that any of my colleagues want to raise, which I don't think is the case, I think I'm going to invite Paul to pick up with the opening presentation. Thank you, Paul. Welcome.
Thank you, Rick, and good evening, everyone. It is a joy to be with you and to be part of this conversation. As Rick said, I'm going to be sharing with you today a little bit about how the COVID pandemic and displacement are intersecting globally, and how each makes the other more complicated, and what we as MCC are doing to respond to the people who are caught in this difficult situation of displacement during COVID. So I want to start by acknowledging that in some places, in many places in North America, it's beginning to feel at least like the beginning of the end of the pandemic. Vaccination rates are high and rising, and in many places, COVID cases, hospitalizations, and deaths are generally headed down, and we should celebrate these successes. But for many places around the world where MCC works, this is not the case. For some places like Colombia and Bolivia, it is currently near the worst it has ever been. And in many places in Africa that had been spared the worst so far, the pandemic is really just getting started as new variants begin to spread. These are also often the same places where health systems are unable to test and report even a fraction of the cases, let alone treat those in need of critical care. And when we zoom all the way out and we look at the scale of death and suffering caused by COVID globally, yes, there have been waves and ups and downs in different places, but the big picture has been this steady march of suffering, now reaching at least 3.8 million deaths globally, and likely closer to 5 or 6 million if all are counted. And if the best way out of this is vaccinations, we have a long way to go globally. This is a map of global vaccination rates, and for many of the places just getting started with vaccines, for example, in most of Africa, it might be years before they reach the same rate of vaccinations that we have today in the US or Canada. And you may notice on this map that the places without vaccines are also generally poorer, countries with weaker governments, with weaker health systems, with weaker social protections. And importantly for our conversation tonight, a higher risk of conflict, of natural disaster, of displacement. And so you're seeing, and you will increasingly see, the concentration of COVID in the places least able to deal with it, and the double burden of that on the most vulnerable people in those places. And to illustrate what this can look like on the ground, I want to zoom into one place where MCC works, and a place with one of the highest rates of displacement in the world, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Congo is home to a stunning 5.3 million internally displaced people and over 800,000 refugees. Many newcomers to Canada in recent years are from Congo. You're going to hear from John later on today. The refugees, the newcomers who were resettled in my wife's home church in Ontario were from Congo. And not coincidentally, DR Congo is extremely vulnerable to COVID, with one of the lowest vaccination rates in the world, just over 1%, inaccessible testing, few prevention measures. Health and social services are fragmented and weak. There is low trust in government and health authorities, and there are just so many other layers of risk and vulnerability, including ongoing violence from armed groups, continued threats from infectious diseases like Ebola or cholera, and the risk of natural disasters. So I returned from Eastern Congo a couple weeks ago. And while I was there, I saw firsthand how these risks compound in times of crisis. I'd traveled there to evaluate our health programs and to provide training on the most up-to-date information on COVID-19 prevention and treatment to our local partners. But on May 22nd, the Nyiragongo volcano just outside the city of Goma in DR Congo erupted. I had arrived just 6 hours earlier. The picture on the left is from outside my guest house door in Goma as the volcano started to erupt. The volcano sits just 20 kilometers from downtown Goma, a major city of more than 1 million people. Over 400,000 people were displaced as they fled the lava, ash, rain, toxic gases, and earthquakes. And the people fleeing that night included the MCC staff in Goma, and I was with them. At least 7,000 families lost their homes. The pictures in the middle and on the right are from the still smoldering lava flows in the Goma neighborhoods of Buhene and Bugeragera a couple of days after the eruption, when our team returned to assess the damage and plan our response. The man on the right, Chiza Bashumbama, is a staff member of our church partner there. He is standing near where his brother's family's home was destroyed. His brother's family was lucky to not have been injured or killed and to have had a safe place to run that night. Although Chiza's home lies less than 100 meters from where the lava stopped. Many others were even less fortunate, losing loved ones, parents and children separated from each other in the chaos of the nighttime evacuation. Those who had no safe place to run to. Those who also lost their livelihoods as productive gardens and businesses were covered in lava. And so in a place that did not need more suffering, you have thousands and thousands more families now displaced with only the belongings they could carry with them that night. The picture on the left was taken at about 2 in the morning, the night of the eruption. After some of these families had been walking for over 7 hours, many had nowhere safe to go or to return to, adding to the millions already displaced in Congo, including at temporary camps like the one you see on the right in Mubimbi, just 10 minutes from where our MCC team sought refuge from the volcano. Fleeing in the night, grabbing everything they could and desperately trying to hang on to their children in the chaotic crowds, COVID was the last thing on people's minds. Masks were rare and social distancing an impossibility. People found shelter where they could, and they did what they needed to do to survive. MCC supports a clinic for displaced people in Mubimbi, and one of the nurses at the clinic, Furaha, explained this, saying, "People come here with many burdens. They've fled violence and disaster. They need food and clean water. Their children need help with infections and injuries. They need medicine. They are scared. Yes, COVID is real and a threat, but it is also just one more risk after many others." we all do what we can. Not unexpectedly, in the weeks since the eruption, cases of COVID have shot up by over 31 times in this part of Congo and across the border in Rwanda, where many fled. Health systems that were challenged before are struggling to keep up. So how do we as MCC respond to these difficult intersections of displacement and COVID? So I believe it's about responding with love and compassion, even when we ourselves are afraid, rolling up our sleeves and doing what we can. In Canada, all of you have been doing this throughout the pandemic in the kinds of programs, in the kinds of stories we're going to be hearing from tonight, welcoming newcomers and not allowing fear to get in the way of showing compassion and welcome. And in Congo, this meant responding to the immediate needs of the survivors of the volcano who had lost their homes and their livelihoods. The picture on the left is the food distribution with our partner in Goma last week. And Chiza, the man you met earlier, was part of that distribution, now helping neighbors and loved ones with food and replacing essentials. And it also means working with healthcare workers like Charlotte and Furaha and the pictures on the right at the Clinic for Displaced People in Mubimbi, ensuring not only that they can sustain vital health services through these times of increased demand, but that they also have the personal protective equipment, the supplies, and the most up-to-date information and training they need to keep themselves and the people they serve safe. It means providing a source of welcome, a place of hope for people in need. As Furaha said when I asked her what sustains her in this difficult work, she said, as a Christian and as a nurse, I know that I can help people. And if I can help, I should help. To see people heal is the greatest reward one can receive. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Paul. Many of us have been paying particular attention to Goma since the eruption, but that truly first-person account was very compelling, very moving. Thank you. And as it turns out, as Paul said, we have with us tonight John from the family, the Ngenda family, who came from Congo and would, of course, been even more closely attentive to this, probably than many of us. So with thanks to you, Paul, we're going to invite Terry and John Terry from the sponsorship group from Abbotsford, BC, and John from the arriving family to share their stories. And as they prepare to do that, we are getting lots of questions. Thank you. This is an extremely engaged group. If your question doesn't get answered, please email it to us and we will make sure that we respond to you. We will, of course, speak to as many of them as we can tonight, but want to give you that opportunity later on. So to you, John and Terry, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Terry Schultz. As you know, my wife and I became interested in sponsorship a number of years ago during the refugee crisis in Syria. And we contacted MCC, who my own parents had been involved with in the early 70s during the Vietnamese boat people days. So we knew who to go to. And we sponsored a couple of gals back then. And then in 2016, 17, we got a call from MCC asking if we'd be willing to sponsor John's mother. And the reason they came to us is because they didn't really have the time needed to go to churches to find a church that would be able to meet together and make a decision. They needed an immediate decision, and we both very quickly said yes. And less than a year later, we were delighted to pick up John's mother, Hope. And a real surprise to us is that she was a sister in Christ. And we just felt so honored that God would give us that opportunity to help her out. Turns out, we found out in conversation over the ensuing day that she had not seen her children in 11 years, and through various political issues and some pretty traumatic things that happened to her family. She was separated from her children and was kept in hiding for many years, and assumed that her children also had passed away, and they also assumed that she had passed away. Nonetheless, my wife contacted one of them through Facebook, and the family was reunited by technology for a while, and we had a pretty tough journey with them trying to get the guys into places that were safe where they could communicate, and particularly where they could fill out forms and refugee type forms to be able to come to Canada. And there was a lot of prayer involved throughout the whole process because we needed some miracles to make things happen, and miracles happen. And one of the first answers to those prayers were John and his brother Dave were the first to come, and Hope, their mother, also in the meantime was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and so we asked her to come to stay with us during that time. And in the meantime, now John and his brother Dave have come, and then 2 other older brothers were also able to come this just before Christmas. So it's a full house, but there's a lot of joy and a lot of gratitude. John.
Yeah, my name is so my legal name is Jeremy Mbaya, and I go by John. And as Terry said, recently, like about a year and a half, me and my brothers were sponsored by Terry and Sandy, which is his wife. We came here in Canada like in December 2019, and yeah, 3 years ago. Before that, they sponsored already my mom, who was here, who came in 2017. Yeah, but before that, we didn't know where she was. We didn't have any contact with her. Yeah, but when she got here, after meeting with Terry family, yeah, we were able to communicate, to know a little bit about her, where she was. Then she told us where she was, like she was here in Canada. Yeah, but about all the process, how they started the process for sponsoring us, didn't know really, because we were like back in Congo doing our own stuff, and they were planning here just by like God miracle. Yeah, coming here in Canada also was like another new experience, and so challenging, because coming from another country to a new country, it's always like difficult, some challenging. And also one of the biggest challenge was the language. I did it personally, me and my brother, we didn't know any English. So English is not like my first language. In Congo, we speak French and some local languages. Then I had to learn English, so I can be able to understand what people are saying. I can be able to have a conversation. That was one of the biggest challenge. And also like the weather, food, the culture, everything. Yeah, but I'm so thankful. I'm getting used to, and a year and a half later now, things are getting better, and I'm so thankful for MCC, for what they did, for Terry and Sandy, their sponsorship. So that's what I can say.
John, thank you for that very personal insight into your journey, your family's journey. Terry, hearing the long period of separation that Hope and her family had, and of course, we know we can multiply this story by many others that have, in fact, here in my community in southwestern Ontario, we're in the midst of hoping for reunification of the family that we helped to sponsor. And again, long periods of absence, but then the joy that clearly is there when people get reunited. So John, congratulations that your family is together again, and it truly is an honor, I think, for many, and that includes us at Mennonite Central Committee, to be part of this joy of reunification and seeing families be safe and making lives together. So thanks be to God.
Thank you.
Well, we also want to hear from Ed and Saif. We're thrilled that you've joined us as well. These are our friends from Manitoba, Southern Manitoba, Steinbach, and we want to hear both from the sponsorship group led by Ed Neufeld and by Saif, one of the members of the ASI family. So please, we hand the time to you.
Saif, are you able to open up your video and your sound? There you are. Okay, so my name is Ed Neufeld. I'm from Steinbach. Our church, Grace Mennonite, has been involved with refugee sponsorship from back in the 1970s as well. At that time, it was more individuals within the church, and then they got support from various people in the church. This time round, when I think, as so many people we were moved by the pictures of Alan Kurdi washing up on a beach, and it was heartbreaking for so many people. And so our church then had a few meetings and had about 70 people kind of show up, and we decided that that was a good enough indication that we were ready to move forward with sponsoring refugees. So we, like Terry's group, we contacted MCC because we knew where to go, and we began planning to have Saif's family, his parents and his 6 brothers, join us. We had determined in advance that we wanted to sponsor a large family, but because all of us were rookies at this, we decided we didn't want to have anybody who had any kind of special needs. And after we'd made the determination that we were going to have the Aussies join us, we learned that there was in fact a young boy who has some special needs, and he has been the delight of all of our lives. He is just an absolute treat. We have loved having him as part of our family, really. Saif was separated from his family. He had to flee because of the army, but maybe I'll let you tell your story for a little bit, Saif. I know you have a long story to tell. You're going to have to give the shortest version you've ever given.
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Saif. I have been living in Canada for about 3.5 years. I was sponsored by Grace Mennonite Church, and when I came to Canada, at that time, I haven't seen my family for about 6 years. They brought me here, and I was so happy to be here. And when I came here, I was planning to start working as an electrician, but I asked what are the requirements, and then they said you need 4 years to study and work. So I decided, instead of working, to go and study instead 4 years to get my electrical engineer diploma. So I started learning English and as well getting my high school diploma to get started in the university. So I went to Red River College, and then they said we can't accept you because you need a higher level English. So I couldn't wait at that time. I asked, and then they said that there's an online school that you can do by yourself. They don't care if whatever you have your English level. So I started taking online courses. Just to online courses that there, yeah, and right now I'm still taking the online courses. I'm almost done, so maybe next year I will start my university. And right now I'm living with my parents, my brothers, and I'm so happy to be here.
Thanks, Saif.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So Saif is missed the last 4 years of school, I think, in Syria, and so
Yeah.
has been making that up as well and trying to get ready to go and do an electrical engineering degree. He's very, very determined young man. Just a delight. One of the questions that we were asked, and then Saif, if you can just kind of hang in here, I want to hear what your family's experience of this was too, was what's it like to prepare for welcoming refugees during a pandemic? After we had invited, or after we had brought Saif's family over, then Saif came. And right around that time, we also applied for and were approved to sponsor Saif's grandma, his 2 aunts, and his 3 cousins to join us in Steinbach as well. And so we began to wait, and we waited and we waited. We waited 4 years before they finally came. We heard back in December, I think it was, just before the pandemic anyway, that they were going to be arriving in January. We had a house rented and furnished, and we were so excited about it all. And then there were some health concerns that came up for the family in Lebanon where they were, and so that their arrival was delayed. And then we heard that they were going to arrive on March, I think it was 19th. And Canada closed its borders, I think it was on March 13th. So once again, we had an empty house that we were paying rent for, and no people coming in. We had we could hear nothing but what was when they were going to be arriving. And so after a few months, we made the decision that we were going to give up the house, and we had to gather, all tried to do it in a physically distanced family's way to empty the house and put things in storage. And then we waited. And somewhere along the line, somebody, our church managed to purchase a house for refugee sponsorship. And so we went and purchased the house. We were going to get possession October 30th. And while we were waiting for that possession to come, we heard that the family was to arrive November 5th. And so we began to get ready for that. And then that was delayed again, and I think again, but they did finally arrive end of November. And one of the things that I remember just most clearly about welcoming Saif's family when they were coming down the stairs at the Winnipeg airport was a large group from church was there. We had signs and balloons and flowers. And I remember the tears of joy really from Saif's mom, Fatin. And I just remember their faces and the welcome we were able to provide. We had anticipated when this family came, we were going to get a church bus, and we were going to go out there with 35 people and all come back together and have this wonderful time. And we were there with 2 people to greet them. And it was so sad because the greeting was so muted. But they did come, and it was awesome. Saif, maybe you want to talk a little bit about how your family experienced the coming during a pandemic, particularly the 2-week isolation period.
Oh yeah, that 2 weeks was so hard for us to have like my grandmother and my aunt and her children. At that time we haven't seen them for about 8 years. So it was so hard to be close and not visit them. So but we did it. We waited for 2 weeks after the quarantine, and then finally we saw them, and we were so happy be with them. We celebrated together, and it was so nice to see them.
Thanks, Saif. So, I mean, and the other part of it was, I think even for our hosts, the way our church organizes, we have a refugee committee, and then we have host families that are assigned to kind of take on the role of just really being the welcomers and people to take them to appointments and to arrange for all the paperwork that needs to be done, schools and all of that kind of thing. And our host families, particularly for this last group, it's been more challenging for them because of the level of isolation. We don't see each other in church, so everything has to be done by an appointment or a Zoom kind of a call. There's less flow to it, and so it's been much more difficult. And even the fact that, I mean, dropping in for a quick visit it's just not done anymore. And so the idea of welcoming has become much more challenging. Rick, how much more time do I have?
I'm going to stop you actually, Ed.
Okay.
Because there's so many questions.
I know, it's all good.
But you know, hopefully some of what you still wanted to say is going to find its way into these last few minutes.
That will be good.
Both. I mean, my head is spinning with questions in addition to the ones that have come in. Powerful stories of pain and loss and waiting and separation, and then, you know, being reunited even under these crazy circumstances. Thank you both. You know, I sometimes when I travel, people ask me, well, you know, you live in Canada, you must be so grateful to live in Canada. Well, of course I am, but you know, one of the things I am most grateful for is private sponsorship of refugees. I think it's somewhat changed who we are as Canadians, that all of these thousands of people have been able to come here and make their homes here. And so say thank you for your part in that, and Ed and your community. These are just powerful stories of welcome, and welcome in complicated times. You know, I do want to go back to our earlier, before I open it up to more general questions. There was a comment from Terry about some serious health concerns of hope, and I suspect I'm not the only one wondering. I think you talked about an advanced stage of cancer, Terry. So I wonder if you could just, or John, one of you, just tell the group about that, and then we'll go to some more general questions.
Sure, I can answer that. Yeah, Hope has had stage 4 cancer for probably since she came. Undiagnosed in the first year, though we tried to get a diagnosis many times. She has had some pretty tough times, but then she has really good times. She's been able to get some treatment that has been very helpful. And so she's on a good run right now. She's able to look after some things for us at home while we're gone. And yeah, nonetheless, you know, I can tell you that on behalf of Hope, we all cover her prayers for her.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry. That's helpful. There have been a few questions about, you know, when travel will be allowed or more opened up. And also, I think for me, a related question around what about the conditions in places that are producing refugees, causing people to need to flee? And Paul spoke a little bit about that. And so let me just make a couple of general comments. Then Brian, I'll give you a heads up that I'll invite you to speak to the travel question. Certainly it is the case that in many of the countries like Congo, Colombia, historically, Syria and Lebanon, where many people, thousands and hundreds of thousands, are fleeing, MCC is involved in other kinds of work that is very committed to peace building and development to make it less likely that people will need to flee. Working at, you know, health and education and agriculture, food security issues often, as well as peace building, because often refugees are created by human conflict. So I think it's important that as part of the context of this story tonight, we talk about MCC's ongoing work in the countries of origin. At the same time, we see private sponsorship, what one of my friends in the refugee program in Ontario often talks about, and Brian, you'll use this term too, that a durable solution, because often people cannot go back to their original homes. And so private sponsorship provides this durable, lasting solution not for a large percentage of those who are refugees, but for those, as you can hear tonight, who are part of private sponsorships, it's a remarkable and life-changing experience. So there has been some advocacy done by MCC. We sent a letter to our own federal government here a while ago saying that we believe it's time because we can do safely the quarantine process, as you heard tonight, so that people who are not safe where they are can begin to move into Canada and into lives of more safety. So we are working in countries of origin. We're active in advocacy as well, in this case, to have travel restarted. But part of the question, Brian, is when will that happen? When will people be able to move more freely? So let me introduce my colleague, Brian Dick, who gives leadership to our private sponsorship of refugees here in MCC Canada. Brian.
Thank you, Rick. And unfortunately, I don't know if I have a good answer to that. I don't know if anyone really does. What happened is on March 18th, just the day before the family that the people at Grace Mennonite in Steinbach were about to welcome, on March 18th of 2020, the government stopped issuing visas to people who were designated to be resettling in Canada. There were about 7,500 visas that were issued ahead of that time, and over since that time, starting at about July of last year, they have been trickling in, and so a few people have come, but they aren't issuing any new visas, and that's the public health issue. It's the government of Canada has made the decision that they want to limit people coming in. Unfortunately, we don't know when the government will make the decision as to when it is safe to start issuing visas and allowing more immigration in general, and specifically refugees. A letter that Rick wrote to the Prime Minister and relevant ministers on this file made the point that that we believe that refugee travel is not discretionary. This is something that people are doing because they need to go, not because they want to go. And so we're hoping that the government will make that decision fairly soon. But yeah, we have no indication. So the short answer is I don't know.
Okay. Well, Brian, you're always closer to these things than I am. So thanks for offering your insights on that tough question. One of the questions that had been given to us from registrants before the webinar began, I'm going to address to Saif and to John. And a moment ago, I made my comment about how grateful I am for the private sponsorship program that we have in Canada, and for the many, many people who have opened their arms in welcome. I also don't want to ignore or pretend that it doesn't exist. The kind of tragedy in London a few weeks ago when a family was murdered with a pickup truck as they were walking on the streets of London. So we also have to acknowledge that horrifying and tragic part of our reality here in Canada. And I'm wondering how how that feels for you as newcomers here. Your sense of well-being, your sense of safety. What are your thoughts as you reflect on that tragedy of a few weeks ago? John or Saif? If you feel you can answer, if not, maybe Terry and Ed would want to comment from their perspectives. John.
Just say the question again.
Well, I was thinking about the family that was killed in London, a newcomer family, when that man with the pickup truck ran into the parents and children and grandmother. And what did that make you think about as a newcomer? How did you feel as a newcomer to Canada and your sense of being safe here in Canada? Je peux répéter en français si ça vous aide.
No, I understand.
Okay. Okay.
But Personally, I've never heard about that story,
Okay.
what happened in London, but I can say about my personal experience here, how I feel about the safety.
Please do.
Yeah, here in Canada, for sure, I really feel safe. I'm really grateful for that. In safety right now, and also the freedom. I think I'm really, yeah, I think I feel really safe right now, till now.
I'm so glad to hear that. And to our other friend, whose name we pronounce safe. How do you feel? Are you aware of that story that
Yeah,
took place in London, Ontario?
yep, yep. Yeah, I heard about it. Sadly, like it happened, but what I think is like this thing, it happens everywhere, and I don't think that Canada is like this. And also, like the neighbors, everyone who is Canadian here, uh, they came to our house. They sent us messages. They say this is not Canada. This is we are not like this, and we understand that. And sadly, it happened. So we know that Canadian people are not like this. But as we know, every place has bad people. But I'm grateful, like thankful that people in Canada, we don't have so many people like that, and we feel safe here, and everyone around us is kind. Like the people here are kind and welcoming everyone, and we are happy with that.
I'm so glad that's been your experience. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
We have another question. Brian, this might be for you too. This is a follow-up because there's been a number of mentions of health concerns, either things that have happened after someone came or things we knew about, that sponsorship groups knew about in families. So how do health concerns, perhaps like hopes, if they're diagnosed before travel, how does that impact an application in terms of the likelihood of a family being able to come?
Sure. The one thing about what happened in 2001 when Canada redid its immigration policy is it changed the way it thought about how we welcome refugees. And before that, a visa officer would look at the case and say, is this person going to be able to settle in Canada? And that included thinking about their health. After 2001, that was no longer a consideration. And so Canada welcomes a lot of people with health issues all the time. We don't always, unfortunately, know about them ahead of time because the medical screening that they do is very basic. It's just seeing if they are safe to travel, basically, or if there are any health issues like tuberculosis. When they arrive, they have access to the provincial health system that we all have access to when we're living in Canada for a permanent resident or citizen. But in addition to that, for the first year, they have something called the Interim Federal Health Program, which provides things like pharmaceuticals, if they need a prosthetic, if they need a wheelchair. It provides a few additional things that our provincial health programs don't provide, some very basic dental. So this is something that we can afford. And one of the things that we do as Canada is we will look at this vulnerability. Somebody in Lebanon who has a chronic disease, say who is has leukemia or something like that, something that can be easily treated in Canada will not be able to be treated there. So we are, in a sense, sharing the burden. We're sharing the responsibilities that those other countries around the world who are supporting most of the refugees can do. 87% of the refugees in the world are in countries next door, countries that cannot afford to support them, and we can afford to help. So that's one of the ways that we do.
Thanks, Brian. That's really helpful, and another change in immigration policy for Canada, for which I'm very, very grateful. Another question is about, and it's come up in both stories, I think, that initially the sponsorships were of, if I may say it, strangers, people that the sponsorship groups didn't already know. So I'm interested again in hearing from Saif and from John. Your families went through this separation when part of your family was able to come and other parts could not, and you had this period of quite a long period of separation. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what that was like, because that's a reality for many, many families who are sponsored to come to Canada. How was it when part of your family had come here and part was still separated and waiting? John, I see you've unmuted first, but I'd love to hear from you.
Okay, yes. Personally, for me, first of all, when I was still like back in Congo, I was like, was separated with my mom like for more than 14 years before that. Okay. Then, yeah, all those years were not together with like my brother all the time. Then, yeah, I've been like living sometimes with like one brother and the two others, like as I have three brothers and the two others like separately. Then just like the 2 last years before coming to Canada, when we found out that mom was here and the sponsorship processes started, yeah, then we were able to stay to live together for that time. Yeah, then that was like the time we were able to start again, like living together, to renew it again as like brothers and yeah. But living also, I wished, me personally, I wanted like, if we were able, so I wanted to come here like all of us, the four of us. That was like my wish, but that didn't happen. But coming here also, the two, me and my brother, little brother, and the two others were still there. That was also like kind of difficult again, another separation. But it was, at some point, it was good because we were able to see mom after so many years, after like more than 13 years. But it was still difficult, it's kind of challenging again. So like another separation again. So separation. Yeah, from me, I've been going through that all those past years. Sometimes, yeah. Till back in Congo, yeah, we're not together every time all the years. So due to some financial situations or family situations, sometimes the two can go somewhere in the two. So yeah, that's how it was for me.
Wow, what a journey. Thank you, John. Thanks for sharing that. Saif, any comments from you and your family's experience?
Yeah, actually, when the war was when the war started in Syria, my family wanted me to go to any other country because I was almost 18 years old, and the one who is 18 years old, they have to serve in the military. So me and my family didn't want to do that. So I traveled to Libya, and we were hoping that the war ends soon, so I come back to my family. The war didn't stop, and then I went to Holland. I lived there for about 3 years, and I was hoping to bring my family, but I couldn't, as I was more than 18 years old. After that, I heard that my family were accepted to go to Canada, and I was so happy for them because I was worried about them every time they have risks. My little brothers, my family, so it wasn't safe for them. After that, I was hoping to see them again. And then they the church sponsored me, and I came here, and I was so happy to see them again, and everyone was to be together. Even though we are not everyone is here. Like my sister is still in Germany and couldn't come, but we hope that she can come here even for a visit. But it's still difficult for her because she's a refugee in Germany. So we are hoping to see the whole family together, especially here in Canada, because we are happy here to live here with the kind people in this country. So that's the story.
Well, thanks for filling in those extra details, Saif. You know what I am struck by as I listen to you and John's stories is how hopeful this is for the many other families. And I'm imagining there are people listening tonight to the webinar who are in the midst of sponsorship, waiting for members of an extended family to come. And hearing your journey and hearing your story, even though there's a lot of pain and loss and suffering and separation, there's also a very hopeful part of it that I hope is generating hope for other people that are listening tonight. We just have a few moments left here, and if you've really been hoping to get a question in that you haven't yet, we're going to take a few more moments. As I said earlier, if we didn't get to answer your question, please email it in. We will try to follow up with you. And feel free to share the link to our recording tonight if you wanted to have others of your friends have more insight into the stories you've heard. You know, Ed, I cut you off earlier, and I promised that you might have a chance to share some further pieces of what you wanted the world to hear tonight. So I do want to circle back to you here before we hit the top of the hour.
I'm going to start by saying that Saif's family, that there are several members of the family who have intellectual disabilities of some sort, and then also with some other kind of physical challenges, and that has provided our group with some really interesting opportunities to find ways to help. I'm going to say this about education. When we first told Kamal and Fatin that Tufi, as his nickname, was going to go to school with every other kid in our town, it would just be regular school. Their shock and joy were amazing to see. It's a beautiful thing. I think that our school systems have become very inclusive over the last, 5 decades. And for me, there's a story in there for all of us to remember that every single person matters in a really, really big way. And that's what makes Canada really kind of special. We're far from perfect. It's far from perfect country, but the desire, the impetus to be inclusive of all people is what makes us a truly amazing country.
Well, you almost have me weeping here, you folks, tonight with these stories of amazing stories. Yeah, I feel somewhat at a loss for words because these go to the heart of who I think we want to be as followers of Jesus, a gospel of reconciliation, a gospel of welcome and hospitality, welcoming the stranger. And these clearly are not strangers anymore. The friendships that have emerged in your communities through sponsorship are also just so evident tonight. We're very grateful. Ed and Terry and John and Saif and Paul, my colleague, thank you for yeah, sharing from your hearts and sharing these very moving, compelling, and hopeful journey stories tonight. And to all of you who've joined us on the MCC's webinar, we are very grateful. We hope this was moving for you, and we invite you to join us again. We also would invite you to check out our podcast, Relief, Development, and Podcast, it's called. Wherever you like to listen to your podcasts, please go have a listen. And we continue there to explore the theme of peace building from a variety of perspectives. So we're going to close here. Tomorrow, World Refugee Day. We have much to be celebrating and so much for which to be grateful. Thank you, and thanks be to God. Until next time.